Absolutely. So the when you started working on your master's, what compelled you to look at type 1 diabetes as opposed to, well, any other disease? But usually when we're talking about low carb diets and their effect on diabetes, it's almost always type 2. And I'm grateful that you looked at type 1 as well. Well, what kind of why did that catch your eye, and what was the thought process behind that?
Mm. So I was really, really lucky that I was able to work with Kieran Rooney for my master's degree and come up with some sort of low carb orientated research project, because he's actually not part of the nutrition and dietetics department. So I had to go and apply to do my own research project with him, and the nutrition and dietetics department were fine with it. So I was really lucky in that point. So we knew we wanted to do something that was, I guess I should say, I was actually called out a few times by my lecturers during my master's degree, and one lecturer particularly that I remember said to me, why are you so interested in this low carbohydrate stuff? You know there's no evidence for it, right? And I was just like, what are you talking about? I got into this through the evidence. I'm not making this up. I've read the literature. I know it's there. How can you say that there's no evidence for this? So when I went into my master's research project, I just said, okay, I have to prove that the evidence exists. So I have to do a systematic review. And originally I was going to do a systematic review for type 2 diabetes, so low carbohydrate diets and type 2, because I was very passionate about type 2 diabetes, given my father was diagnosed recently. And when I went looking to see if there were any systematic reviews out there, there were tons. So many people had already reviewed all the literature, and when I was looking through the conclusions, it was generally in favor of low carbohydrate diets. And I was like, okay, well, people obviously aren't reading these, but I can't just go and do another review on type 2 diabetes. They're already there. So that's when I went looking into other clinical populations, so epilepsy, cancer. And then I found that for type 1 diabetes, there was no review. There was very little science on what level of carbohydrate is optimal for this population. And even in the nutritional management guidelines for type 1 diabetes, it basically gets to a point where it talks about carbohydrate intake, and then it just has a little line underneath saying, oh, there's not enough evidence to recommend any particular level of intake, so we're just going to revert to the Australian dietary guidelines. And I just thought, well, that's not good enough. We have this population of people suffering from type 1 diabetes who are essentially intolerant to carbohydrate. Mm-hmm. And there's not enough research to recommend a particular level of carbohydrate. And I just said, that's not good enough. The Australian dietary guidelines are based on a population of healthy people free of diabetes. So you can't just say, oh, well, if it works for them, then it works for someone with type 1 diabetes, because the metabolism is so different. So that's when I said, well, I have to do a systematic review, and I have to pull together all the evidence I can find on low carbohydrate diets for type 1 diabetes. So that's how I'm so passionate now about type 1 diabetes, but I guess before my master's degree, I didn't think too much either way. And I'm a massive advocate for science or evidence-based nutrition, and I personally felt that reverting to the Australian dietary guidelines for type 1 diabetes management was not evidence-based nutrition. So I knew I had to then go and pursue that.